Hello, I am Akshat Gupta and we are starting Thorax of gross anatomy. So we are starting Thorax. So the major topic of Thorax are structure of Thorax. Structure of Thorax में क्या क्या चीजें हैं? The main topics of structure of Thorax: bones, osteology, segments या फिर compartments. एग्जाम segments और compartments. जितने भी compartments होंगे, main compartments. Position of organs in them, in thorax. Muscles, arteries, veins, nerves, and major organs. Major organs क्या क्या है यहाँ पे? जैसे major organs are lungs and heart, lymphatics, and so these are major topics we cover in this lecture. So we are starting this. You will get the PDF of lecture in the description box. You can check this. See now. So first we study the structure of thorax and what are the bones and what are their characteristics and major properties. Okay, so we are making first thorax bones. So bones क्या क्या है thorax में? Let's talk about ribs, vertebrae, sternum, this. So these are major bones of thorax. So first we prepare the thorax diagram. So we first may make a lateral section. मतलब means anterior posterior is like this position, front to back. Okay. So this is the main thorax diagram, and we should talk about the major general important terminologies. First, this is vertebral column, vertebral bones, and we start thorax from T1 vertebra. Okay, T1, T2, T3. See this, and T4. So this continues on and from. So now taking this section, this is the whole bone is sternum. It is a sword-like bone, sword-shaped like bone. Now let's say this is the head. This is the head is called this is the shaft of bone, shaft of rod. We should hold this. Now this is the main sword, and this is the tip. Okay, this bone is sternum. It has three parts. First, upper manubrium, Now body, and at the tip is xiphoid process. Xiphoid process. Okay. So first we take the section of this and talk about the inlet and outlet of thorax. So this is देखिए. Now this is inlet. Inlet means the at point at which all structures, major vessels, lymphatics and nerves pass inside the thorax, and one is outlet. This is the point at which all structures like major veins, arteries and all other things exit from the thorax. So these 2 points are most important. Now take the one important point. This point is called manubrosternal joint. Manubrosternal joint, the point at which manubrum part of sternum join with body of thorax. This is also called sternal angle. Sternal angle. It is important landmark of our body because through this mark we can count the ribs of our body. Okay, thorax. So at behind this, on vertebral column, just behind this end, this line, if we make a small line of this to the vertebral column, then we get a point at which the point at which T4 vertebra and T5 vertebra intervertebral disc So on vertebral column we get the intervertebral disc of T4 and T5 vertebra. So this is the important landmark at external angle. If we trace this line, so from behind and front, at front we get the manubrosternal joint. Sternal angle, इसको हम angle of Lewis भी बोलते हैं. This is also called angle of Lewis. Okay. Lewis. Then now take the another section of thorax. Sternal angle पे there are many important structures we can talk about. So first हमने क्या डिस्कस किया? Manubrosternal joint, manubrum, body, xiphoid process, and now talk about this ribs. These are the ribs. Ribs are the important bones which make the walls of the thorax, like front, anterior, lateral, and sometimes posterior wall also. Posterior wall is also formed by vertebral column, and interior sternum and vertebral ribs. Okay. Now this is the important landmark also. This is second rib at sternal angle. Okay. So there are 3 main points. First, manubrosternal joint. Trace this in behind T4, T5 vertebral disc. Second rib, and this sternal angle can easily be felt if we go down from manubrosternum to body. We get a ridge. This is prominent ridge. This is called sternal angle on chest area. Okay. So inlet is the point at which all structures of thorax enter, and outlet from which all thorax exit. Okay. So note this. Now talk about another point. Sternal angle important. Sternal angle important things. First, second rib हो गया. Okay. Now, first we take the section of upper inlet of thorax. Inlet में हम बात करेंगे, मतलब क्या क्या structures इस thorax के अंदर आएंगे. Like say, what are the major structures entering the thorax? Like esophagus, ribs, esophagus, aorta, मतलब arteries means arteries, veins, done, veins, heart, lung, lymphatics, nerve. These are main structures found in thorax. Okay. Now take this section. So we proceed. So first we take all other important landmarks. So they take this section. From xiphoid process to vertebral column. If we take this, we find intervertebral disc of T9, T10. Done. Another important landmark and done. And diaphragm, for diaphragm be just from up. Okay. Diaphragm be just behind. The T5 vertebra, this is T5 vertebra, and T10, T11. So diaphragm, this is called diaphragm or outlet. This joined at T10 and T11 vertebra. Done. So this is the important landmark for diaphragm. What is diaphragm? Diaphragm is a flap sheet-like musculotendinous structure which cover the outlet of thorax. Diaphragm. And which diaphragm? Thoraco-abdominal diaphragm. Flap sheet-like musculotendinous structure which cover outlet. Then outlet is covered by this. So now we divide the thorax in many more parts. So this is sternum. This is vertebral column. This is T4 and T5 vertebra. T5. Done. And this is T9, T10. So this is an imaginary line which divides the thorax in major two parts. First, upper covolium. This structure contains lungs also, heart also, but the main space and is hollow in between lungs. In short, the space between two lungs is divided into many parts. Let's say the structure of thorax in front. So this is. Remember, thorax is a conical structure which have cutted end. Let's say this is a cone. If we cut this end, so this is thorax. So we take thorax from anterior posterior view, AP view. So we know these are the lungs, two lungs. Now some space remain. This space is major. The space. This is very important space. The space between two lungs which also include, now we know this is the space between two lungs, but it also includes some anterior part. Let's say some anterior part like just anterior part, just sternum के पीछे वाला, just behind sternum, which also include some anterior and posterior part. Posterior part. Done. This space is called mediastinum. Mediastinum. This space is called mediastinum. Mediastinum. What is mediastinum? The space between two lungs. It also includes some anterior part and some posterior part also. Some anterior and posterior part. Posterior part which just anterior to vertebral column, या फिर just front to vertebral column and just behind sternum. This anterior part. ठीक है? And between lungs is also included. This is the main portion. This space is called mediastinum. Done. So we divide this section into many parts. Thorax. From this lateral view. Done. So this is the sternal angle. It is an imaginary plane which divides the space between two pulmonary lungs is into many parts. First, this is called superior mediastinum. And this is inferior mediastinum. Mediastinum. Done. Now we take this section. This is inferior mediastinum, and we know it is also divided into many parts. We know the space between lungs is also contain lung, heart. We know heart is present between two lungs. So if we, let's say this is the lungs. Done. This is lungs. So where is heart? So heart is present this portion. So it also approximately heart is present in inferior mediastinum. Heart. So we can take heart is present in inferior mediastinum. So heart divide it into three parts. Inferior mediastinum is also divided into three parts. Now we know this is heart. This whole space is between two lungs. Okay, between two lungs का space है. It also divided into inferior mediastinum into three parts. Middle, anterior, and posterior mediastinum. It has three parts which divided by heart, anterior to heart and posterior to heart, and the section in which heart present. Then anterior, posterior, inferior. This all form inferior mediastinum. Done. So you can note this. So now first we are starting from the muscles of upper limb which cover some portion of thorax. We are starting muscles of upper limb which cover the thorax. Okay, some portion of thorax. So these are the muscles, main muscles. So main muscles include pectoralis, major, minor, muscles of upper limb, muscles of upper limb which cover thorax. From posterior side, we can say trapezius major, trapezius muscles are major. Only trapezius. Latissimus dorsi on dorsal side. Pectoralis major, minor. Some fascia. Now we can ignore this. Fascia. Serratus. This serratus has many muscles. Serratus anterior, serratus posterior, superior, inferior. So there are 3 serratus muscles. Serratus anterior, serratus superior, posterior superior, and serratus posterior inferior. So these are some muscles which cover the portion of thorax. Okay, so we can find this muscles location. Okay, so now first take section. Let's say this is thorax. This is sternum. Okay, and bones. Okay. These are ribs. This is anterior view. So in anterior view, we know that first 6 ribs. From first 6 ribs, there is a large muscle called pectoralis major in front of chest. If we dissect the chest, first pectoralis major. Now if we remove this, now we remove the pectoralis major muscle, like let's say this. We can find pectoralis minor, which attached to 3, 4 or 5th and 5th rib, 3rd, 4th and 5th rib. 3 points. 2, superior middle part of coracoid process of scapula. Now ignore this. Let's say this is just it behind to pectoralis minor. Okay, pectoralis major. So pectoralis minor behind to major. Pectoralis major found front of chest. Done. So 2 muscles complete. Now we take about the trapezius muscles. So now take the back side of the thorax. So these are the vertebral columns. So this is vertebral column. Done. And these are the ribs. We know. Okay. We know that here scapula is found. Okay, scapula here. So we know there are 3 muscles which attach to scapula. Already know in upper limb. The 3 muscles are rhomboides, major, minor, and levator scapulae. Done. Let's say this is cervical vertebra, thoracic vertebra. Thoracic and cervical vertebra. Thoracic, cervical. So the 3 muscles are levator scapulae. Done. Levator scapulae. Attachments are first C1 to C4. Done. C4, C5. Okay. Then just below levator scapulae. Then from above, just below this, this is rhomboides minor attached to spinous margin of scapula on posterior aspect. Then this is rhomboides minor, and just below this, which cover the major portion, major posterior medial border of scapula, rhomboides major, rhomboides major. Then these are the muscles of upper limb, which also cover the thorax. These are extrinsic muscles. You know extrinsic and intrinsic. The intrinsic is which is part of that, मतलब muscle which is part of that part, मतलब muscle वो muscle जो particular area का part हो, and extrinsic the muscle which come from another place to that part. Then extrinsic means muscle which come from different part to that organ, and the intrinsic means muscle which arise from that part and insert and this part, insert at this part, मतलब insertion भी वहीं से होगा और origin भी वहीं से होगा on same part. Then extrinsic intrinsic देते हैं. Intrinsic muscles and other structure of that part, जिस part की भी let's say we are talking about thorax. Then extrinsic बोलेंगे. Extrinsic means extrinsic structure come from different part to that, different part to that part. Done. Meaning of extrinsic and intrinsic, these are come in under extrinsic condition, because they are not muscles of thorax, they are muscles of other part like upper limb, abdomen, etc. Okay, and sometimes back. Then so if we remove these muscles, cut these muscles and remove this scapulae, then मतलब means remove the scapula. Scapula को remove करने के बाद let's note this. Done. After removing scapula, we find this is now again take this is vertebral column and this is ribs. First we take muscles of serratus posterior, inferior serratus and posterior inferior. Then the serratus posterior superior means serratus posterior होगी, posterior side on superior aspect, inferior aspect कहाँ होगा, below, नीचे की तरफ, downward. Okay, so serratus posterior is attached to, now this is skull. Skull has fibrous projection, fibrous ridge-like projection on the cervical vertebra. Has cervical vertebra has fibrous sheet like extension called is ligamentum nuchae. Ligamentum nuchae. What is ligamentum nuchae? Let's say this is skull, this is cervical vertebra, means bones of cervical region. A fibrous ridge, fibrous muscular ridge बोल सकते हैं, fibrous tendinous ridge basically, start from occipital protuberance and go on cervical region, cover all cervical vertebra to C7. Okay. From this, a muscle start and go to second to fifth rib of second to sixth rib of T2, let's say T2 to T5. Let's say, or we can make another some ribs. Done. There are 4 serrations. Serration means some serration fingers like projections. Some serrations projections emerges from ligamentum nuchae and attached to 4 ribs on posterior aspect. So 4 ribs are, we can say, include T2 rib, T3, T4 and T5. Serratus posterior inferior emerges from posterior aspect of cervical region like ligamentum nuchae in origin and go on posterior aspect to T2 to T5 vertebra, T2 to T5 ribs and cover the posterior aspect of thorax. Done. Like this. This is skull, cervical region, ribs. Done. It covered like this. Vertebra arise from this area, go like this. Cover 4 ribs. So this is serratus posterior superior. So serratus posterior superior बारे में we can talk. Let's say serratus posterior superior. Origin and insertion. Origin ligamentum nuchae, wait, just origin ligamentum nuchae and insertion on posterior aspect. This is present on posterior aspect, not anterior. Anterior is this. Insertion T2 to T5 rib, posterior. Done. So we covered the serratus posterior superior and serratus posterior in present on back. So this is back muscle. It cover also 4 ribs. So we can take direct insertion. First, let's say we can rub this. Now you can note if you want. Done. Now talk about serratus posterior inferior. Serratus posterior inferior, let's say this is area of back area of back. This is vertebra column. This is ribs. Done. This is now. So first we take the thoracic rib T11, T12. Now the next section is after thorax is lumbar. So L1, L2. So these are 4 vertebrae and ribs are include T9, T10, T11, T12. So these are 4 ribs. Here ribs. This is ribs. And these are vertebra. attach from this, like this. Let's say T9 ऊपर होगी ना. This is, let's say 11 T11 vertebra, T10, T9. Okay, so T9 it attached like this. These are first striation, second, third from lumbar L1 and fourth continuously T12 तक attach, मतलब means two parts. Ribs में कहाँ attach है? Ribs attachments are ribs attachment this like this. T9 vertebra से the origin, T9 vertebra to vertebra, T9 rib to T11 rib vertebral column. Done. Vertebral columns attachment are vertebrae T11, T12, L1, L2. Vertebral attachment like this. We can rub this and form clear diagram. Done. ठीक है. T8, 9, 10. These are thoracic vertebra. 11, 12, L1, L2. Done. So 8 rib arrives from T8 vertebra. 9, 10, 11, 12th rib. T9 rib, T8, T9, T10, T11, T12. These are ribs. So serratus posterior inferior all attached like this. Let's say T9 rib. Like this. Ten. And posterior segment, 4 striations present, which cover some vertebrae, some ribs. Present obliquely, cover the back region. Done. Thorax and lumbar region. So this is serratus posterior inferior. Then after this, serratus anterior, we know serratus anterior in upper limb. It arises from first 8 ribs and go behind and attach to the medial border of sternum and anterior aspect. We know. So let's talk about the trapezius muscle. Done. Serratus anterior लिख लीजिए. First 8 ribs to medial anterior scapular border. Scapular border. Sorry, scapular border. If we talk about sternum, okay. If we talk sternum, done. So serratus anterior covered, posterior, superior, posterior, superior, inferior. Inferior just attachment like obliquely ribs and vertebra. Done. Now talk about the trapezius muscle. Trapezius muscle. After this muscle, like say muscles of scapula attached muscles to scapula, and these just cover this muscle. A large, broad muscles of back which cover the whole back area, which is called trapezius. It is a kite-like muscle. Ligamentum nuchae, kite-like ligamentum nuchae attachment, scapulae, and then cover the all thoracic vertebrae like this. Let's say this is, now first note this. Done. Let's say this is whole human back. Done. These are the limbs and neck. Neck में we know this ligamentum nuchae, trapezius muscle attachment. We talk about the trapezius muscle attachment. First attach to ligamentum nuchae, then go to spinous process of scapula on inferior aspect, inferior lip of spinous scapulae. Okay, spinous of scapulae. Then go inferiorly and cover the all thoracic vertebrae. Done. Attachment. So this and this are the origins, and this is also, and this is insertion. It is a trapezius muscle के बारे में लिखे तो लिखें trapezius. A kite-like back muscle cover superior back area. Superior back area. Done. Insert at origins. Origin is ligamentum nuchae. Nuchal line, ligamentum nuchae. Ligamentum nuchae. Inferior spinous lip and insertion is thoracic vertebra. Thoracic vertebra. Vertebrae. Done. So we cover the whole muscles. Pectoralis, first talk about pectoralis major, attached to first 6 ribs to humerus. First minor just behind pectoralis major. Remove this. On posterior aspect trapezius, we talk about this. If we remove trapezius, first we found 3 muscles of upper limb: rhomboides, major, minor, and levator. Now remove scapula and these muscles. We find serratus posterior, inferior, serratus posterior, superior, and below on this thorax region we find serratus posterior, inferior. Serratus posterior, inferior attachments we know already. Means vertebra. वर्टिब्रा में कौन कौन सी है? वर्टिब्रास आर T11, T12, L1, L2 एंड रिब्स में T9, T10, T11, T12. Done. So these are the attachments of serratus in posterior, inferior. Okay, serratus posterior, superior. We already talked about this. Serratus anterior, we know this is the main line. So we cover the whole in extrinsic muscles of thorax. Done. But we can take screenshot. You can take. Note the important point. This is origin of serratus posterior, inferior, and this is insertion. Done. Insertion. So note this. Now move to the other things. First, we talk about osteology of thorax. After removing this, we find thorax muscles and bones. First, we take sternum. Sternum. We know it has three parts. This is this bone of sternum. Three parts. Manubrium, body, xiphoid. Then these are the three parts. First, take about the manubrium. So this point superior laterally, it forms sternoclavicular joint. Sternoclavicular joint, and this is gliding variety of gliding variety of synovial joint. Gliding joint. Okay? Then gliding joint. And just below this, it forms first rib joint on both sides. This is the first rib joint, rib 1, and note that this joint is a primary cartilaginous joint. Primary cartilaginous joint. Cartilaginous joint. Done. Primary cartilaginous joint. Above, this is the gliding variety of synovial joint. Now, this is the point at which second rib joint. This is the sternal angle. The sternal angle opening like this. First, we take the lateral section of manubrium. This is the lateral section. Above, attached to clavicle. Below, first rib, and this portion. Second rib, half attached to manubrium and half attached to sternal body. Second rib. Then these are the 3 points on sternum. And second to all other ribs, second to 7th ribs. All sternocostal joint are plain synovial joint. Done. So this is the lateral section. Lateral. Manubrium section. Below this, the body of sternum. Body is like this. The body has half attachment on lateral side, second rib, because second rib half attached to manubrium and half attached to this second sternum body. Second rib. Now its body contain on lateral side 4 complete ribs attachment. Third rib, fourth rib, fifth rib, sixth rib. Done. Now remove this section. Third, fourth, fifth, sixth. These are complete rib attachment and form plain synovial joint. Done. And on inferior aspect, we get half attachment like this, second rib, half attachment of seventh rib on body and half attachment on xiphoid process like this. So this is body. In anterior aspect, it contains many ridges like this. Means body of sternum is also a combination of many bones, many sternebrae. It is a combination of many sternebrae. Sternebrae are the small bones which form the sternum like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. These 4 sternebrae. These are the 4 sternebrae like vertebrae. Vertebrae, parts of vertebral column, sternebrae which combine and form the sternum. All single is called sternebrae. Sternebrae. Then sternebrae. These 4 sternebrae combine and form the body of sternum like this. So we get ridges. Then each one is called sternebrae. Part of sternum. Sternebrae. So these are the ridges. Now talk about the xiphoid process. This is body. Xiphoid process. Xiphoid process is a small projection which has many attachments. First, half attachment of seventh rib on both sides. Then half attachment of seventh rib, and below this we get a big muscle attachment of abdomen. This muscle is called rectus abdominis. Abdominis. This is muscles of six pack muscle. Then these are the 2 xiphoid process attachment. So we cover the whole sternum of the thorax. First, manubrium attachment, and this is also a synovial joint. Synovial joint. Then, so this is the sternum. Then the whole sternum is covered. Main important points: sternebrae, ridges, vertebral attachments, seventh half, which one is half, which one is full, all are important point. These are the half, this half, this half. These are full. Then xiphoid process, sternum, body, manubrium. Attachments, lateral, and they form this ridge is formed manubrosternal joint. And note that important point. This is a secondary cartilaginous joint. Sternal angle is secondary cartilaginous joint. Secondary cartilaginous joint. This is very important. Done. Now first up we move to thoracic vertebra. Thoracic vertebra. Vertebrae. So vertebrae are 2 types. So vertebra are 2 types: typical and atypical. So what is the meaning of typical and atypical? What is the meaning of typical? So let's say, take an example, vertebra. A typical vertebra is which has a body a spinous process, 2 transverse process, a spinous process, and costal facets. and a neural canal like this. So this is typical vertebrae, which contain generally three parts: body, wait, like this, body, pedicels, transverse process, facets, and spinous process. This is transverse process. Transverse process, spinous process, body. The vertebra is example of irregular bone. Done. Irregular bone example. Irregular bone. So this is typical vertebra. Any deviation from this we call atypical. Done. These are the features of typical vertebra. And vertebra which do not contain these features are like atypical. And another important feature is if we take lateral section. So from lateral section, it is look like this. Let's say this. So this is lateral section of vertebra. It contains a transverse facet on transverse process on antral aspect. This is spinous process. And one important thing, on lateral aspect, it contains two facets like demifacets. What are demifacets? Half facet is called demifacet, which attach to ribs, particular ribs. Let's say this is the vertebra of T3 vertebra. So T3 is a typical vertebra. What is typical feature? Main on lateral aspect, one superior demifacet and one inferior demifacet. Superior demifacet is a big facet and inferior demifacet is small. Superior demifacet superior demifacet, inferior demifacet. Demifacet. So these are also important features. The important features are transverse process, spinous, facets, costal facets बोलते हैं. These are costal facets. Costal facets for tubercle of rib. We will talk about the rib next. Okay? This costal facet, superior inferior transverse facets, body and spinous process. These are the features of typical rib. Done. These are typical ribs. Deviation from this are atypical. So typical ribs are T3 to T10. Sometimes we include T9, but on grace, this is grace. We sometimes include T9 also, but majority T10 to T3 are typical ribs. Done. These are typical ribs. And deviation from this, like, and what are the role of facet? Let's talk about this. This is T3 vertebra. So on superior facet, a T3 rib like this. Rib is also like this on attachment facet. It has also contained two facets like this. This is inferior facet of rib surface, and this is superior facet. So inferior facet of rib joint on superior demifacet of vertebra. Let's say simple attachment. Rib are half attached to superior facet and half attached to above rib, above vertebra. Let's say this is rib, T3 rib. So T3 rib attached like this. Like this. Majority attached to particular vertebra, adjacent vertebra, and some part of rib attached to above vertebra, like this. Some part of this attached to above vertebra, like this, rib. And same on like, same for this T4 vertebra, some attachment here. So on particular vertebra, on superior facet, a particular adjacent rib attached, and on inferior facet, the rib just below to particular vertebra attached, like on this. Some minor facets, majority portion attached होगा superior facet में of vertebra, and in minorly so inferior facet में, like this. So these are the 2 point attachments: superior demifacet, inferior demifacet. Superior demifacet में particular corresponding rib attach होती है, and on inferior facet just below rib below on this. Then wait. So these are the typical ribs, and atypical ribs contain, like let's say we know the rib attached to intervertebral disc between two vertebrae, rib attached to between two vertebrae, superiorly, inferiorly. We take this section. We know. Now talk about atypical. We know that the ribs attach from start from thoracic region. So in cervical region there is no rib. So on superiorly, we know the first rib has to attach on the completely from first thoracic vertebra. Let's say we know this is thoracic vertebra T1, and we know ribs attached like this. Let's say T1, T2. So T2 rib की बात करें, attached like this. This is T2 rib. On intervertebral disc, rib correspondingly attached, but on cervical region we know first rib has to attach like this यहाँ पे, but it does not attach to C7. This is wrong. First rib completely attached on T1 vertebra. So T1 vertebra contain complete facet, not demifacet. So T1 vertebra is not a typical rib, it is atypical rib, like this. It contains complete facet for first rib. Done. And costal facets are also present. So this is the atypical feature. Otherwise, typical ribs contain two demifacets, but it contains single facet. Done. Now talk about the second rib, second vertebra. This is first vertebra, second vertebrae is also atypical. Note this first. Second नहीं, next आइए हमारे यहाँ पे भी T2 करिए. Next rib is, next vertebra is 10th vertebra. 10th vertebrae is also atypical. What is atypical feature of 10th vertebra? 10th vertebra also contain complete facet. complete facet, not to 9th. So 10th vertebra also contain complete facet, so it is also including like this, atypical. Second, now go on 11th rib or 11th vertebra for 11th and 12th. 11th and 12th, they first and 10th rib, 10th, first 10th vertebra, okay? They don't have costal facet on transverse process. एक मिनट से पूरा ठीक कर लीजिए. देखिए जो हमारे टिपिकल रिब्स होते हैं, these are T2 to T10. T2 to T10, 10 T2 to T10 हमारे और also 10th भी नहीं होंगे, 9th, because 10th is also atypical. 10th is atypical, T2 to T9 और हमारे और are atypical means typical, and atypical include first, 10th, 11th, 12th. These are 4 atypical vertebrae. Typical means typical are T2 to T9. Then 10th include in this section. 11th and 12th don't have costal facets, so these are included in atypical. Atypical vertebrae are first, 10th, 11th, 12th. Then because 10th and first don't contain complete demifacet, and 11th, 12th don't have costal facets on transverse process, and also have complete facet. And these also contain complete facet and costal facet. So these are atypical and typical ribs. Typical ribs features are spinous process, transverse process, costal facets, body, pedicels like this, superior and inferior demifacets. These are the features of typical rib. Any deviation from this include in atypical. Atypical ribs are atypical vertebrae. First vertebra, 10, 11, 12. Note this. Sternum and vertebra. Now talk about the ribs. So ribs are also come in 2 categories like typical and atypical, like vertebrae. Ribs and vertebra are typical and atypical depending on their features. Some common features present in some rib and vertebra called typical, and deviation from this include in atypical. Ribs. Ribs are 2 types, typical. Typical ribs features are first that we draw first rib. We draw a single rib. This is a typical rib. This is a typical rib. The main features of typical rib are it has 2 parts, main 3 parts. First, this posterior part, posterior head, and this is anterior head. Anterior head anterior part, anterior end, and posterior head. Posterior head. And third is shaft. This is shaft. Typical ribs. Now talk about the posterior head. It contains three things. First, articulating surface means part which join to particular vertebra. It contains two facets and one crest. This is the crest which divide the rib articulating surface into two parts. First, superior facet and inferior facet. We talked about this in vertebra like this, superior demifacet and inferior demifacet. Let's say this is vertebra, T2 vertebra and T3 vertebra. We take T3 rib. This is T3 rib. So it attached like this. Two surfaces. First slightly on above and more completely on below, like this. Attached like this. This is the attachment part. Inferior facet. Attach. It attach. Articulate this. Articulate to above vertebra and articulate to corresponding vertebrae. Done. These are the corresponding vertebrae. So this is the posterior and posterior attached articulating surface divided into two parts, and this is the crest. This is the crest between two heads, between two facets. Then crest. Now the second part is neck. This is neck. The point in between articulating surface and tubercle, and this is tubercle of rib. Tubercle of rib. Neck present between articulating surface and tubercle. Tubercle present on posterior surface, like superior surface of rib. Then this is the posterior head. Now come to anterior head. Anterior end. Anterior end. Let's say this. Anterior end is slightly rough. Slightly rough and attached to and join with costal cartilage. Costal cartilage. We know, and on anterior aspect, hyaline cartilage is present. Cartilage. Hyaline cartilage. Done. And shaft is a long flat part which form the major rib portion. This is a flat part. Then anterior end, posterior end. Posterior end में three parts हैं. Neck, tubercle. Tubercle attached to transverse facet, costal facets of transverse process of vertebra. We know transfer process in vertebra. We talked about this transfer process. So tubercle of rib attached to that part. Medial side of tubercle. So medial side of tubercle is this. Attached to vertebra, costal facets. Done. Now talk about the shaft. Shaft is a curved portion, and on lateral aspect it has slightly twisting portion like this. Twist means twist करेगी on axis like this. This is like rib. Let's say this is rib. So twist का मतलब means like this. Twisting angle generate होगा यहाँ पे. So इसमें रिब में ट्विस्टिंग एंगल प्रेजेंट होता है, अटैच ऐसे होगी रिब, ट्विस्टिंग एंगल मिलेगा नहीं, वी फाइंड ट्विस्टिंग एंगल लाइक दिस, स्लाइड ट्विस्ट होगी एक्सिस पे रिब अपने, देन ट्विस्टिंग प्रेजेंट इन रिब शाफ्ट में, ट्विस्टिंग प्रेजेंट, and this portion called angle of rib, angle of rib, and this is the most weakest part of rib, mostly rib fracture at this point, angle of rib, weakest part. Of rib fracture. This is clinical condition. Then clinic. Clinical. Then first we talk about the major vertebral features also. We have skipped. So vertebra we know, body transfer process and body transfer process, spinous process. So we know vertebrae, some important features also. So rib and here, ribs are the main typical features of rib. These are the typical features of rib. Any deviation from this called again atypical. So first vertebra के small features देख लेते हैं पहले. Vertebra small features like this. We know body, transverse process, costal facet, superior, inferior, superior and inferior demifacets we know. Now come and these are the spinous process. Now take about this section. This is the portion. A small project line, small area, like small canal. This is superior vertebral facet. This portion, and this portion. Superior vertebral facet and inferior vertebral facet. Superior. Here. Wait. First complete this. Here, take this. Body slightly curved, present, and then transfer process start. Done. And here, if notch present, and then spinous process. Done. So this is canal. This is canal, and this canal. These are called superior vertebral facet, vertebral notch, superior vertebral facet, inferior vertebral facet. Now talk this and this. This and a small, this and small like this. it also present like this. Wait. We first remove the transverse process. We ignoring the transverse process so that we can draw particular. This, the superior vertebral notch. This is superior vertebral notch which is projecting backward. It presents on post superior aspect of pedicel. Superior vertebral notch and inferior vertebral notch which projecting forward. This projecting forward, this projecting backward. Backward project backward and inferior vertebral notch back forward. Done. So these are the important markings. First, superior inferior demifacets, transverse process, costal facet, spinous process, body, superior vertebral facet, inferior vertebral facets, and superior and inferior vertebral notches. Done. Now take the superior section of vertebral column. The superior aspect is like this. The body, transverse process, then spinous process, then facets. So here these are the two parts. First bluish part, this, and here a canal is present which is called neural canal where spinal cord is present. Spinal cord passes through this vertebra. Done. So this part here, we mark this, ye wala part. This part is called pedicel. And here the part between transverse process and spinous process, this part is called lamina. The pedicel and lamina help in formation of neural canal and with body. Then and transverse process arise from joint of pedicel and lamina. Transverse process arise from joint of lamina and pedicle. Spelling, ignore the spellings. Okay. Then these are the important vertebral features: body, superior aspect, superior. Done. Now, first important marking: the inferior vertebral notch is more deep and it is shallow. Done. It faces backward. Superior, ये important point है. Sorry, superior vertebral facet. Wait. This is deep. This is shallow. This is deep. Inferior. Deep. Inferior vertebral facet is more deep than superior vertebral facet. Important point. Done. So these are the ribs, typical features, and some important features of vertebra. Also, these are the typical features of vertebra. Don't confuse vertebra. Done. So vertebra and typical ribs features complete. Typical ribs include T3, T2, T3, T4, T5 vertebra, T6, T7, T8 and T9. These are typical ribs. Done. या फिर सिंपल उसका T3 to T9 typical ribs. Typical ribs and typical ribs features are this. एंगल क्लिनिकल पॉइंट में क्या है, वीकस्ट पार्ट होता है, ट्विस्टिंग प्रेजेंट होती है, क्रेस्ट, आर्टिकुलेटिंग सरफेस पोस्टीरियर, हेड, हेड में क्या, हेड, दिस इज हेड, 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 नेक, ट्यूबरकल, नेक प्रेजेंट बिटवीन हेड एंड ट्यूबरकल, ट्यूबरकल प्रेजेंट ऑन सुपीरियर एस्पेक्ट ऑफ रिब एंड medial, it on medially it attached to costal facet of transverse process of spine. Done. Now take out the borders of rib first. Now you can note this. Done. Borders of rib. And some important things. Okay. Borders. For typical ribs, it is a flat bone. Rib is flat bone. Typical rib like this. If we straight this rib, we find like typical rib is like this. If we straight, imagine it is, if we straight rib particular, so we find a superior border. Border is a flat ridge-like line and surface is plane surface. Superior border and inferior border. It is smooth. It is slight rough because contains some groove, slight rough. And a anterior surface and posterior surface. This is anterior surface of rib, anterior surface, anterior surface and posterior surface on posterior side. Posterior surface. Then the superior border is smooth, curved like, and inferior border is slightly rough because it contains a small groove like this. We turn this rib like, if we take this section, we see from this, हम यहाँ से देख रहे हैं like this. We see from this side. So this is anterior surface, superior border, inferior border, and posterior border. ठीक है, then posterior border. So this is a costal groove. And it also has lips like this. It presents slight like this. Costal groove. Anterior lip, posterior lip, and this is floor. Costal lip में क्या होगा? Anterior lip, floor. This is floor, upper part. Floor, and posterior lip. Posterior lip is not markable. Posterior lip. These are the costal group points. Anterior lip, floor, and posterior lip. Like this. Anterior lip. Anterior lip, AL. Posterior lip, PL. Floor. Done. These are the common features of typical rib. Done. Typical ribs are T3 to T4 to T10. These are the typical ribs. Means first wait. So these main are the typical features of rib. Done. Wait, note 3. Now let's talk about the atypical ribs. Atypical ribs include, means the ribs which do not contain, like these features, important features. So atypical ribs are first rib. We know first rib is completely attached to T1 thoracic vertebra, not to cervical vertebra. So on head it has single facet, and first rib also contain many atypical features. So first rib atypical हो गई, second atypical हो गई, 10th rib पे चले तो from 10th rib we know 10th rib is also completely attached to particular T10 vertebra. So 10th rib and 11th and 12th we know they are also atypical because they are not complete features of particular rib, because no costal cartilage present but not completely developed. So we talk about particular features. Let's say example first rib and typical ribs में कौन से आएंगे? Typical ribs में T3 to T9. These are typical ribs. Typical ribs. Note. First 2 and last 3 ribs are atypical and other are typical. Then first 2, last 3. Let's say first rib. First rib is completely atypical. Atypical. Because we know a rib is flat, anterior surface, posterior surface. इसमें ऐसा कुछ है नहीं. No anterior surface, no posterior surface. It is flat horizontally, like this. It is present like this. Tubercle होगा. Flat rib like this. Flat like this. This is flat. The first rib is like flat like this, and other ribs flat this. Other typical ribs like flat this. Anterior surface, posterior surface, but no anterior surface and posterior surface present in first rib. It is flat like this. ऐसे. Superior surface, inferior surface, anterior border, posterior border, completely changed that. Done. So it contain borders. First rib चल रही है. First rib. So borders anterior, posterior. Done. Surface superior, inferior. Done. And it is very short rib, very short, shortest. then shortest. And one important feature of this rib, if we put and from this method we can find typical and atypical rib. First, put the rib on table. Let's say this is posterior end of rib. Posterior P लिख देते हैं. This is anterior end. If we put this rib on table like this is flat surface. If we put a rib, let's say this is rib. If we put this rib on flat surface, we know anterior end and posterior end both completely attached to surface. Both attached to surface. If we put this rib, so this is atypical. But in typical rib, at the same time, no anterior and posterior surface attached to surface because it has curvature. मतलब means twisting present होती है. जिस वजह से at the same time no anterior and posterior surface attached to the flat surface. But in typical completely attached रहते हैं. For typical feature, anterior and posterior and attach मतलब touch the flat surface. If we put rib on table like this is flat surface. So anterior, this is anterior and posterior both and touches the ground same time पे. This is feature of atypical. Done. From this we can find particular demonstration, demarcation. Done. Atypical features. Now some important attachments. First, a costal cartilage. Costal cartilage were here. Attachment of subclavius muscle. Subclavius muscle. First muscle. Here the attachment of scalene anterior muscle and a tubercle also present in first step. This is called scalene tubercle. Scalene tubercle. Tubercle. And here scalene medius. Scalene medius. Scalenus medius present on lateral shaft side पे. Lateral shaft like this. This is rib. This is rib. So scalenus medius attached to this portion. This portion attached to either scalenus anterior, scalenus posterior, scalenus medius, and here scalenus posterior. Then scalenus anterior on superior surface. Then and scalenus medius laterally border to surface. Then and here scalenus posterior. Then scalene tubercle form two surfaces, anteriorly and posteriorly. Anteriorly, a vessel found, a blood vessel, this called subclavian vein anteriorly, and posterior tubercle artery present called subclavian artery. Subclavian artery. Then, so these are important attachments of rib. Muscles and scalene tubercle, arteries, veins. On posterior aspect, from here, posterior aspect of tubercle is an important structure also passes. This is the lower trunk of brachial plexus. This is lower trunk of brachial plexus. We know plexus, brachial plexus come from cervical and thoracic region, mainly cervical region. So it has to pass from the muscles of neck, and these are muscles of neck, scalene muscles जो भी हैं, scalene muscles, all are scalene muscles from of neck. So brachial plexus passes between from this. Brachial plexus mainly passes scalenus anterior and scalenus medius. Passes between this, like this. This is scalene anterior. This is scalene medius. Brachial plexus passes from this. Here. This is brachial plexus. And go in arm. Brachial plexus. So lower trunk passes from this. Posterior to scalene tubercle. Done? Scalene tubercle here. Done? And some important vessels also. Now these are the important attachments. Let मिटाओ देते हैं कुछ चीजें, नोट कर लीजिए. Done. Now go to the second rib. Second rib also like first rib, completely first rib, but it is slightly bigger. Done. But it is also a atypical rib. Second rib also atypical but slightly bigger than first rib. Done. Tenth rib में क्या feature है? Tenth rib is same like atypical, but main feature is single facet on head, not two demifacets for attachment for vertebra. Done. Because even we know 10th vertebra is also a atypical vertebra, so this rib is also a atypical. And 11th 12th rib की बात करते हैं. 11th 12th ribs are for 11th 12th नोट कर लिया होगा. For 11th 12th rib, no angle tubercle, costal cartilage, not costal cartilage, costal cartilage developed नहीं होता पूरी तरह से, not completely developed. Not developed. Done. So these are also called atypical. Done. So these are the typical and atypical ribs. You can note completely from this. So first we revise the first rib and then proceed to forward. So first rib is important. First rib, important structures passing from this. Then because it is very important. Then scalene tubercle, subclavius muscle arise from costal chondral junction. Then this is costal cartilage and chondral junction. Then a groove form here, anteriorly scalene tubercle gain and posteriorly. Posteriorly two structures passes. Subclavian artery and lower brachial plexus trunk. Lower brachial plexus trunk. Anteriorly subclavian artery, subclavian vein. Muscles are here, scalene anterior, medius, scalene medius and scalenus posterior. Then, so these are the important structures in corresponding to first rib. Then, so here osteology of rib, osteology of thorax completed. Now we go to the other structures. Now come to the walls of thorax. So we are starting walls of thorax. Walls of thorax. So thorax walls are formed by bones. We have already talked muscles and some membranes. Then the walls also contain structures like nerves, arteries, veins, lymph nodes, lymphatic ducts, lymphatics. So these are the main structures. So first bones we have completed. Muscles, we are starting muscles of thorax. Now we talked about intrinsic muscles of thorax. Muscles present between two ribs, जो actual में part है thorax का. Muscles of actual thorax. Otherwise muscles we have previously completed are the extrinsic muscles, means they are part of another region but come in thorax. Done. So देख लीजिए walls. Now start कर रहे हैं. ठीक है. So first We prepare a thorax, general. This is sternum, general aspect में बनाया. Sternum xiphoid process. Done. On posterior aspect, vertebral column होगा. उनसे ribs, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 7. Wait. This is 7. Same from this side. 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is ribs of thorax. Now first we form so complete structure of thorax from both sides. This forms the thorax bones region. Now first upper inlet, below outlet and walls. Now take the example of ribs. In between two ribs, there are three muscles present. Extrinsic में external intercostal, internal intercostal and internal intercostalis. Done. So three muscles, intercostalis. So three muscles present, innermost intercostalis. Done. Three muscles present between two ribs. Now take the example of two ribs. This is rib 1, एक rib, two rib. This is ribs. Here three muscles present. Muscles. First, external intercostal, muscle, internal intercostal, muscle and innermost intercostalis. Innermost intercostal. Innermost intercostal muscles. These are the three main muscles of thorax. Done. These muscles present between two ribs, arise from upper rib and insert in lower rib. Done. Between two ribs. So here 12 ribs present. So there are how many pairs of muscles present? We get 11 pairs of muscles because 11 spaces present होंगे each side. 11 spaces this side, 11 spaces this side. So it forms 11 pairs because 12 ribs in 11 pairs. Done. 11 pairs. So arrangement like this. We know rib, anterior surface, posterior surface. Now come to typical rib. Done generally. Anterior surface, posterior surface. So anterior rib attached like this. This is rib. Anterior surface. This is lower rib. External intercostalis muscle arises from upper rib, lower margin, anterior lip, outer margin, lower superior rib. Means upper rib में कैसे बोलेंगे? Upper rib attachment like outside, anterior border, anterior lip of groove. Costal groove present होते हैं. We know costal groove present in inferior border. Costal groove के anterior lip पे. Say external intercostal muscles arises and go in this, like this. here lower rib में क्या बोलेंगे हम, lower rib anterior surface of upper border, because we know this is upper border or superior border, this is lower border, upper border. Done. Fibers arrangement, remember it is very important. Fibers arrangement, downwards fiber arrangement, downwards medially, anteriorly. Done. These are three important terms, downwards, anteriorly, medially, means ऐसे आप जाएंगे anteriorly, anterior आना है fibers को. Done. Arrangement of external intercostal muscle, but remember one thing, first चलिए अब this rib muscles start originating from कहां से, let's say this is general assumption है, let's say this is vertebral column, this is one rib, this is other rib. If we straight this rib, assume करना just, we know here rib tubercle present, so it arises from here near tubercle, on post near tubercle and go in front. Let's say this is, here is sternum, this is sternum. अरेंजमेंट देखिए, मीडियली आ रही है, डाउनवर्ड्स आ रही है, एंटीरियरली, एक्सटर्नल इंटरकॉस्टल मसल्स अरेंजमेंट नियर टुबरकल से अराइज होगी एंड लोअर बजाएगी अपर एंटीरियर बॉर्डर पे ऑफ लोअर रिब, सुपीरियरली एंटीरियर लिप ऑफ कॉस्टल ग्रुप, एंड देन नाउ कम टू द कॉस्टल कॉन्ड्रल जंक्शन, costal cartilage. We know this is costal cartilage. Here this muscle ends, and now it continues with a membrane, fibrous membrane like sheet. Here it continues with sternum through fibrous membrane, and this called external intercostal membrane. Done. This is very important. So this is arrangement of external intercostal muscle. First, fibers arrangement, upper border, lower border, near tubercle से arise होगी, anteriorly it ends and continues as external intercostal membrane. Done. Note this arrangement, external intercostal muscle. External intercostal. Now take the example of internal intercostal. इंटरनल इंटरकोस्टल, फर्स्ट अटैचमेंट्स चेक करेंगे. इंटरनल इंटरकोस्टल में सेम अटैचमेंट्स होंगे, बट अरेंजमेंट इसका कैसे होगा? अरेंजमेंट अपर अटैचमेंट अपर रिब पे, अपर रिब, लोअर रिब, attached to the floor of rib, means this attached to the just floor, not like this. Just let's say this is rib, we know. Here, from here attached to the external intercostal, and this point, lowest point, is attached for internal intercostal. This is rib part, lateral rib portion, cross section, internal intercostal. Done. So it arises from the deepest point of rib, attached upper rib से निकलेगा and then go to the surface of upper rib. लोअर रिब में क्या बोलेंगे? लोअर रिब up superior border, डन. सुपीरियर बॉर्डर पे अटैच रहेगी. अबव अपर रिब में क्या बोलेंगे? अपर रिब deepest point, deepest ridge, of groove. Done. Deepest ridge of groove. This is the attachment of internal intercostal muscle. Now fibers arrangement again. Fibers arrangement. Fiber arrangement. Again डाउनवर्ड तो होगा, अपर रिब से लोअर रिब डाउनवर्ड, पोस्टीरियरली एंड लैटरली, मींस ये बैक साइड में आती है. इस रिब्स में फाइबर अरेंजमेंट आर हियर, दे आर परपेंडिकुलर टू ईच अदर. Fibers arrangement are perpendicular, external to internal. These like this go from this and this laterally. So they form 90-degree angle between fibers rib. External intercostal rib form 90-degree angle between fibers. Let's say this, here this. देखिए upper rib to lower rib ये medially आ रही है and internal intercostal ये laterally जा रही है. They go laterally. They come medially. So these fibers form 90-degree angle between fibers. Now come to the arrangement. Fibers, ये important. Done. Now continue this vertebral column again. Downward and cartilage is small and cartilage. Done. We grow sternum. Wait. Cartilage. We grow sternum for this. Now again we draw two ribs for arrangement of this muscle. To understand this rib and this rib. Now this muscle attachment is just opposite to external intercostal. It arises from here, external lateral border and rib anterior surface, costal cartilage, like this. Go posteriorly and end near to angle of rib. Angle of rib means point where rib tilt, lateral aspect में, like this point. Here it ends. And now यहाँ पे end हो गया इसका, किसका? internal intercostal का. Now again it continue to vertebral column through internal intercostal muscles, intercostal membrane, sorry, membrane. Done. So these are arrangement of two muscles of thorax. First external intercostal, then internal intercostal. Internal intercostal arises near the tubercle and vertebra of the body. Near tubercle and vertebra of the body, external intercostal arises on back side. Then go downward, forward, and medially. Downward, forward, anteriorly, medially. Fibers go from upper to lower rib. Upper rib में anterior aspect of lower border, and lower rib superior border के anterior aspect पे. Then go downwards and ends at near junction of costal chondral junction and continue to sternum through intercostal membrane, external intercostal membrane. Now come to the internal intercostal membrane, intercostal muscles. It arises lateral border of sternum and costal cartilage, go downward, laterally, and posteriorly fibers, and ends near the angle of rib. From here, it continue to the vertebra through internal intercostal membrane. Done. This arrangement of two muscles. Now come to the third muscle. You can note this. थर्ड मसल क्या है? इनरमोस्ट इंटर कॉस्टल मसल. Then it has three parts. It is divided into three parts. It is divided into three parts. Here small muscles form the complete innermost intercostal muscle. Three parts. First, sternocostalis, also called transverse thoracis. Transverse thoracis muscle. Done. Second is subcostalis, and intercostalis, intimi. All these completely called innermost intercostal muscles. These all form innermost intercostal muscles. Arrangement देखते हैं now. Arrangement. First come to the sternocostal. Here let's say this is the sternum and this is the anterior aspect of thorax. Here ribs. Now come to the posterior to thorax. It is present posterior to thorax or inner side of the thoracic walls. Innermost muscle of the thorax. Just present posterior to sternum and ribs. Posterior aspect. Let's say this is sternum. Sternum की inner side, posterior aspect like this. This is posterior aspect. It present here. This done here. So draw करके देखते हैं posterior aspect of sternum. Posterior sternum. Done. Posterior है, anterior नहीं. Ribs. We know this is seventh rib, fifth, sixth, and fifth rib. Done. Done. It arises lower aspect of sternum inner surface. Arises. बोला ना arises. Arises xiphoid and xiphoid process. And some lower rib costal cartilage, mainly T7 to T12. T7, mainly T7, T6, T7. These ribs. This ribs costal cartilage. Done. This is the origin of sternocostal, lateral border of sternum, lower xiphoid and xiphoid process on posterior aspect and some lower ribs costal cartilage. Origin लिख देते हैं. Origin posterior lateral of lower sternum body, sternal body and xiphoid process. Xiphoid process. Then posterior lateral of xiphoid process. Origin and lower rib cartilage, costal cartilages. Done. These are the origins. Insertion. This go to the here. We know this is the second rib. Third rib, fourth rib, and fifth rib, sixth rib. Sixth rib भी होगी. It go posterior to above to second rib, third rib और insertion में fourth rib, fifth rib and sixth rib. These are the insertions. Attachment. Posterior aspect of sternum in front of chest. Front chest में posterior aspect में sternum में. Insertion. T2 to T6 rib. Posteriorly होगा innermost aspect पे. Posteriorly. Done. खत्म sternocostal. Now come to the subcostalis. Here it is also present in posterior aspect, means innermost thorax muscle, innermost, so but it present on vertebral column side. So first we draw here vertebral column. Innermost aspect, vertebral column. Let's say this is vertebra. पूरी vertebra बनाते हैं. This is vertebra. Done. And we know ribs arises. हम small ribs बना रहे हैं. ठीक, पूरी rib नहीं बनाइए, आधी rib बनाइए जानबूझ के. ऐसे multiple ribs arises, 12 pairs we know, not a big deal. Done. Now subcostalis muscles arises as first rib and then crosses second rib and sometimes third rib attached to the again upper border of second or third rib, like this. हर rib से arise होगी. फर्स्ट सेकंड रिब को छोड़ सकती हैं एंड अटैच टू फोर्थ रिब डायरेक्ट लाइक दिस, मीडियली जाती हैं, मीडियली गोज मीडियली। सबकॉस्टैलिस, टू रिब समटाइम्स टू वन, ऐसे स्किप कर, वन रिब को स्किप करके नेक्स्ट रिब पे मीडियली लाइक दिस। Then this is the pattern of subcausalis inner aspect of posterior thorax, then inner aspect मतलब inner aspect में posterior thorax में they are also multiple हो सकती हैं, 12 होंगी, 12 arises है तो origin lower inner surface of rib, then crosses, ये इंपॉर्टेंट पॉइंट है, crosses one or two rib below insertion, go to the थर्ड और सेकंड रिब, मतलब फर्स्ट रिब को क्रॉस करिए तो सेकंड में जाएगी, एंड इफ टू रिब क्रॉसेस देन गो टू द थर्ड रिब सुपीरियरली डन, सुपीरियरली सबकॉस्टैलिस, एंड अगेन देन पार्ट कम इंटरकॉस्टैलिस इंटीमाई। देखिए anterior aspect, posterior aspect covered, now come to the lateral aspect. It is present in lateral aspects, lateral ribs में present, let's say lateral ribs, this is rib laterally, we know lateral ribs in laterally, it cover the medial 2/4 portion, inner aspect में middle 2/4 portion of rib, shaft का, mainly shaft then in inner aspect में होगी तो कॉमन है inner aspect, then means सबसे innerly, let's say this is rib, we know this is rib, again this just lower rib, here this is external intercostalis, this is inner intercostalis, inner intercostalis, and again from floor to this is innermost intercostalis, external intercostalis, internal intercostalis, and this is innermost intercostalis, intercostalis, intimae, subcostalis, sternocostal, whatever. So arrangement this external intercostalis, but remember one thing, innermost intercostalis is not complete, it is present in parts, subcostalis, sternocostal, intercostalis intimae at this. Then intercostal. This is internal intercostal. This is innermost. intercostal muscle. Intercostal, what is meaning of intercostal? Between two ribs. Costal word used for ribs. Done? Intercostal. This is important for remembering. Done? These are the three muscles of thorax. These are intrinsic thorax muscle. Done? Note this. So last arrangement देख लेते हैं. How they are arranged in thorax. First T2, T3 rib, T4, T5, T6. Now the final diagram is how they arrange are in thorax. Let's say this is vertebra. We know this is superior aspect of thorax. Vertebra, canal, whatever. And we know rib attached. How rib attached? Rib arises and go to the costal facet, through costal facet attached to the tubercle of rib and go forward. Here from this also go like this. And in forward attached to the sternum, we know. This is sternum, let's say. Then there is superior aspect of thorax. So how they arranged muscles? See. Anteriorly, externally, most externally. Wait. Most externally muscles attached is external intercostal. External intercostal. And continue as membrane. External intercostal membrane. Done? Now let's say remove the ribs. We only understand the attachment of muscles. So this is also muscle, this is also muscle. Ignore the rib, no rib. This sternum, just this sternum and just vertebral column. No any rib attached here. Only we are talking about arrangement of muscles. Done? So now go to the posterior muscle. Posterior. This is only muscles, remember, not rib. Just only muscle. Don't think it is a rib. Only muscles. External intercostal is muscle, external intercostal membrane. Just inner to it, this is internal intercostalis muscle and posteriorly continue as internal intercostal membrane. Then internal intercostal membrane. Now come to the third muscle, innermost intercostalis. It arranged in three parts. First, this is black here on both sides. This muscle is sternocostal. In posterior aspect, this is subcostalis and this is innermost Intercostalis intimi. Then let's say subcostalis intercostalis intima 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 लिख सकते हैं. And the last this is sternocostal costalis or transverse thoracic muscle. Transverse thoracic then muscle. Whole this and this form innermost intercostalis muscle. Done. This is arrangement of muscle pattern. You can note this. Done. So here our thorax first lecture completed. Thank you. You can find notes of this lecture in description box.